Hey, it's been an incredible 2023, and I want to thank you all for your incredible support this year. We are going to have a giveaway to start the year off right. So before we start this out, it is the holidays, so it is time to sit down, have a drink. So please join me as I describe and talk about the incredible projects that we did this past year. It was an amazing year, a lot of incredible projects, a lot of challenges, which you know I love a good challenge because it pushes you to the limit. So I want to say cheers, happy holidays, happy new year, kickoff 2024, right? You know I love a good beer, and this is a great one. It's a nice dark lager. But I also want to talk about the giveaway that we're going to have. So our giveaway today is going to be for an AquaGarden tabletop fountain kit. But I'm not just filling this baby up with water. I'm going to fill it up with beer. I think this will be very fitting for us as we do our Q&A here today. We could actually see a running fountain, and I think I'm gonna need another beer. This holds a little bit more than I thought. How much beer does an AquaGarden tabletop fountain kit hold? Now we're gonna flip the little switch here. Oh, look at that. I think we're gonna have a foaming sensational fountain. That actually looks really, really good. Because I love beer and because I love to tie everything, and I mean everything, and it drives everybody crazy. It drives my wife, my kids, my coworkers, everybody nuts on how I try to bring everything back to nature and plankton and how the actual world works. But this is the perfect example of this stuff. So look at all the foam that's actually being created here. That's actually a byproduct of the fermentation process. You have these complex carbohydrates. They're being broken down by enzymes and fungi and yeast. And what happens is through that process, the byproducts that are created are actually carbon dioxide, but also alcohol. That is beautiful flowing beer coming out of a fountain. It is a successful recipe. Some of these breweries have been around, this has been around since 1543. Do you think they know how to make beer? Absolutely. They've been doing it for centuries. They have it dialed in. We created a 20-step process for creating beautiful water features. So what we want to do is, as I talk, as a lot of you probably have heard and probably make fun of me, like all my friends and relatives, they always make fun of all the stuff that I talk about. Plankton, copepods, tardigrades, biomimicry concepts, the interstitial spaces in between rock and gravel, all of that stuff I love to think about and talk about. It's kind of the way my brain is wired. But if you're paying attention and if you tally up all those different words that I actually say, you're going to be able to get this. So the first person who sends us the right information of the right number of words, which I don't even know what that number is at this point. I'm just going to talk and do my normal thing, and then at the end we're going to have to go through and count them up all of ourselves because I have no idea what's going to come out of this mouth. I do know what's going to go in though. It's time to have another beer or another sip. We have to be responsible during the holidays. Have another sip of beer as you sit back and relax. So check out the list right here. So I really enjoyed getting all your questions, so thank you. That's actually what feeds us and gives us more information, and hopefully during subsequent vlogs we will come up with some of these answers because there is an overarching theme behind all of our projects. One of the questions that I think that pops up on a routine basis is right when we finish the project, I get a lot of questions saying, why is the water dirty? If you put in this expensive filtering system, how come it's not doing its job? The reason it's dirty is because we just filled the pond. I'm finishing up the project and literally hopping on a plane and heading back to Chicago. I have a home, I have a wife, I have kids, I have dogs, I have animals, I have all types of stuff actually happening around home. So I need to get back to my family as quickly as possible. So we don't have the necessary amount of time to wait a week or sometimes more for the water to clear up. So what's happening, you've seen me working in mud, like pretty much every single time, like literally every single time I think we get rained on. So all of the mud and the junk and the dirt and debris that's coming in from all the heavy equipment, plus the rock and gravel when it's delivered, is not pre-washed. This is coming out of quarries. This is coming from natural hillsides and things like that, so it has stuff on it already. So when we add water, all that stuff becomes soluble and it floats around the surface. What happens when we add bacteria into our water feature, it's going to take time for the bacteria to actually colonize the the filter. It's known as a bacterial flock. This is an amalgamation of different bacteria and enzymes, and when you look into a pond, it's very, very visible. You're going to see kind of these little worm-like things on the surface of the gravel. This is actually the initial formation of biofilm. These bacteria are going to accumulate and they start to stick together, but what happens, they actually have like an electronic charge, almost like mini magnets. That's how they get their food. There's small particles flowing through the water that have an opposite charge, so they're going to be sucked in to this bacterial flock around the bottom of the pond, inside the filtering system, etc., and they're going to be trapped. That's actually part of the filtration process. Man cannot duplicate this. And I really, really want to stress this. We are working with nature, biomimicry concepts, setting up a living, breathing ecosystem and allowing nature to do its job. That's all we're trying to do, but there is a set process. We have to have specific flow rates. We want to slow the water down. We want to make sure that the water comes into contact with everything. We want to have the necessary dissolved oxygen because these animals, microscopic that they are, they still breathe just like us. The dirtier the water is, the more oxygen that they actually require to actually break down and consume that. And during that process, they actually replicate super, super fast. I mean, they're going to double, triple, quadruple as more and more food comes in. So when a brand new pond is created, this is kind of that prebiotic type concept. We're actually jump-starting the ecosystem with a specific blend of microorganisms that we know works for us. That stuff's going to start to colonize, and as soon as food is added in, it's going to keep growing and spreading more and more and more. But it takes days for that to occur. That's why you actually just have to sit back, open up a beer, relax, let the mud do its thing. It's not going to hurt anything. Enjoy it. Listen to the waterfall. Let nature run its course. And in a week or so, you're going to have pristine water quality. It's not going to look like that. I like my dark lagers. What we're looking for is that crystal clear, pristine water quality that all of us love.
Somebody asked a question about algae, saying, I have a very simple small pond that I've made this summer. It's been beautiful while it's been warm, but all of a sudden with less sunlight and heat, it's starting to grow algae big time. What can I do to kill the algae and keep the pond and fish healthy?
First of all, we never want to completely kill algae. Algae is like my best friend. I love algae because it does an incredible job for us. It's going to be absorbing and utilizing nutrients in the water. It's going to take up ammonia and the nitrite and the nitrate and all that stuff through its growth processes. The other thing that it's doing is the actual algae itself is actually home to other microorganisms. It's actually creating its own little mini ecosystem within itself. So now all of a sudden your fish are going to come in and they're going to start feeding on all that stuff. They're going to be feeding on it because koi, goldfish, these are opportunistic feeders. They have a ventrally located mouth. That means their mouth is located on the bottom feeding organism. They're going to grab mouthfuls of rock and gravel in their mouth and they're going to sift it through. They spit out the rock, but during that process, they're going to pick up all the little morsels of food. So you never want to completely eradicate algae, but we want to control it. The big, long, crazy, nasty strands that are going to be coming up, I'm going to definitely increase my bacterial additions, definitely after rains. Also, when you start to see that shift in the change of seasons, the temperatures changing. So we want to continue to add that stuff because the life cycle of bacteria. So we start adding it in, life cycle, and all of a sudden we have food coming in. The population is going to explode until they eat everything. They're very, very efficient. Once they eat everything and they saturate the ecosystem, the entire population is going to crash. It's going to create this kind of a sine wave type of a look. During those valley sections, when you don't have full microbial populations living, that's when you're going to have algae blooms. That's when you might see some water quality issues and things like that. You want to constantly be adding these different things in. The other thing that I'll add is sometimes I'll add in EcoBlast, a non-toxic additive. Literally breaks down the cell walls. It explodes the cell walls of the algae. Doesn't completely kill it, but it knocks it down hard enough and low enough where it doesn't get out of control. You're going to have all this busted up mass of algae and stuff like that floating around. So what we're going to want to do is make sure you clean out your skimmer system. The skimmer system is going to suck all this debris into a catch basket. It needs to be removed. Otherwise, all this junk just accumulates inside of the water column and it's going to continue to release more nutrients into the water. The skimmer system is basically, it's like restricting your diet. All this stuff, These organic compounds are going to go into a basket, so instead of allowing them to completely break down, we take the basket out, we remove all of that floating stuff. So now we've changed the diet of our pond, very similar to our own bodies. We eat, we masticate it, we chew it up, and we break it up into smaller parts, and all of that stuff goes down into our intestines, and our intestines are actually home to trillions of bacteria that are living inside of us that are actually responsible for breaking down all the stuff that we eat to make it usable for us to grow off of. We have a symbiotic relationship that's actually inside of us. Same thing in a pond. We want to restrict the diet. We want to understand what's going inside of it. The ideal situation would be to add in a dosing system. I don't want to turn this into a big commercial or anything like that, but the dosing system is an effective method. And I'm telling you, it's effective because I use it and it works. We didn't always have that over the years, but I do know for a fact, for me personally having all these water features and interacting with all the stuff over at Aqualand, I know when I add it in on a routine basis, I have very consistent results. Just like the beer makers, when they put in the right mixture of stuff, they can get consistent results, which makes me keep buying their beer. Very, very simple.
Somebody said, Ed, you and Adrian are two peas in a pod. I love the vision both of you have for Mother Earth.
Adrian Grenier, I mean, a phenomenal guy. Huge fan of Entourage, and even The Devil Wears Prada, but Entourage #1. But just an incredible guy. And when he first contacted me, I went out to his place outside of Austin, Texas, and we hit it off immediately. And it's because he has a different way of thinking about stuff. He sees problems. He sees issues with agriculture. He sees issues with how we are currently creating food and how this is impacting our earth. So he's definitely speaking my language, and he wants to invest in his personal property to create a food forest type of a setup. Regenerative farming and aquaculture and permaculture, we're taking all these different disciplines and working together to create a symbiotic relationship where the earth actually heals itself, but it actually provides food at the exact same time. High quality food where we're working with organic concepts. We're not working with man-made fertilizers, we're working with different types of compost and bacteria and enzymes that are actually cycling the nutrients. Again, putting those bacteria and enzymes and fungi stuff together in the right setup, aerating it periodically, allowing that organic stuff to break down. Now it is food for the entire property. The caveat is everything requires water, including making beer, mostly water. But there is a water footprint on anything and everything we touch. What he wants to do is set up an aquatic system. He had an existing pond on the property, highly degraded. What we're doing is we're pumping water from that degraded pond. We put in an intake system to restrict the diet. Again, this pond was degraded because there was feet, and I'm talking many, many feet of muck on the bottom. And it's because the bacterial breakdown of all that stuff was not happening completely. It was accumulating faster than it could break down. Right away, put in the intake bay, restrict the diet, remove some of the muck. A little bit of a liposuction type concept, sucking out all that stuff that's accumulated down in the bottom. And then we wanted to put in a large wetland filtration system, which is basically detoxifying its different layers of sedimentation, mimicking nature. Look at springs and things like that. So that's what we're trying to do. So when I talk about layers of rock and gravel, we take high velocity water. We allow the solids to settle out inside of a settling chamber. The water then comes into contact with different layers of rock and gravel. I'm using rock and gravel because it's exactly like nature. It's a home for microorganisms. But what we want to do is slow the water down to allow that biofilm to actually build up on the rock and gravel itself. The water is going to flow its way through the interstitial spaces of the rock and gravel. That's where all the home of the microorganisms are going to live, and they're going to cycle the nutrients, and they're going to create food for higher plants, which are actually going to feed Adrian and Jordan and their entire family. The water then is going to flow into a food production area where he's going to have bluegill and small fish inside of it, which are going to feed off of all the other microorganisms, and they're actually going to create protein. So this is an incredible process, and again, it's exactly what happens in nature. Just on a really, really condensed scale. We're identifying specific goals, then all we're doing is we're modeling stuff after natural ecosystems. I loved hitting it off with Adrian, learning from him, learning about his vision of how he's going to get all this information out here. But more importantly, we also went and visited some incredible springs in the Austin area just to get that extra inspiration that I look for on every single one of my projects. This is hard work, I'm telling you. This is not easy. The things I do, the sacrifices that I make, brutal.
somebody recognized that we do a lot of work with Brian Barczyk. They said Brian needs to put up an Ed signal in the sky like Batman whenever there's trouble and he needs to fix it.
Oh my gosh, I love it. Yeah, the pond professor sign going out there. I love it because unfortunately there are issues. There are a lot of different ways to build water features. We have one specific one that we utilize. Again, we have the right recipe that we like to put together because we get consistent results. When I'm working with a mixture of different influencers, they've had a lot of different contractors coming in. Brian is also doing a mixture of different things from aquariums. He has alligators, he's got pythons, he's got anacondas, he's got some incredible animals there, but it's more of an indoor setup and it's coming from the aquarium industry. But to me, there is no difference between that acrylic tank and box than there is with an ecosystem pond. But what we want to do is make sure we have a skimmer system on it. We want to have some rock and gravel or some sort of a substrate inside of it. Remember, every single animal, no matter what type of animal that they are, every one of them requires water. So if it's an aquatic animal or even desert type reptiles, still require fresh water. Water the way nature intended it. Throughout history, man has utilized water in all of its different forms for a wide variety of applications, including drinking, but it's water the way nature intended it. I think animals are the perfect example of that. They need stuff inside the water. They need living water in order for them to thrive. I use that biomimicry concept. I want to create an ecosystem exactly where those animals normally would be found, and then once I understand where they're normally found, I can put together the right recipe of stuff in order to create a healthy environment for the animals. And when animals are in a healthy environment, they're going to do better. They're going to show less stress. And when an animal is not stressed, it's easier to care for them. And there's nothing I like more than seeing all the different unique animals that I've had the opportunity to work with over many, many, many years actually thriving, and not just thriving, but actually breeding. So when you put pairs of animals together and they start to breed and they start to interact in the way they were intended to, that means we've done our job properly. So Brian Barczyk is an incredible man. I mean, he is giving Greg and myself and Brian so much mentorship over the years. We've known him for a very long time. We've done work at his personal home, his aquarium house, as well as the Raptarium, and his latest endeavor, which is Legacy Aquarium, which is, by the way, shaping up to be phenomenal. I mean, there's not going to be anything else like it on the planet. And it's Brian's vision of connecting people with nature and animals. How could you not love a man like that? Brian, unfortunately, has been struggling recently. He was diagnosed with pancreatic cancer, which is near and dear to me. I did lose both of my brothers, unfortunately, to pancreatic cancer as well. So I know the pressure on him. He has been rallying. He has the best attitude I have ever seen of anybody. So please, if you are out there and if you want to help support somebody, he is definitely a worthy cause because he gives himself constantly. I mean, this man just keeps pouring into people. All the different animals and stuff that he has connected people with is just unbelievable, as well as connecting people. I was just recently at AnimalCon earlier this year. YouTube collaborators and content creators from around the world that came in specifically for Brian. So like I said, Legacy Aquarium is amazing. So again, please support if you're in the season to give. Definitely a worthy cause.
One of the biggest projects we did this year, right, was with Shaquille O'Neal, and everyone recognized, like, this is going to be one of those things that Shaq appreciates more and more as the years go by. Shaq is such a good guy. He deserves everything and all of his success. He genuinely cares about people and does so much for his community. It's unmatched. Good to see the big man living the dream.
Oh my gosh. Shaq, larger than life personality in every single way possible. I mean, he is a character. He loves having fun with people, and it's these type of people we want to help. We built the pond for him several years ago. It worked very, very well. They decided to do this water feature on their own, and it was like an epic fail. So they thought, because they had a natural creek system going through the property, that if they just dug everything out and created a dam at the end, that this would fill up with beautiful spring water and he would be able to fish in it and swim in it and walk in it, etc. But it never happened, and it was because the soils were not right. He has like a sandy clay mixture, so I could actually feel it. When I get that clay on me, it actually had grit inside of it. Water holding clay should not have any sand or debris or anything like that inside of it, because it's going to allow micropores and passages for the water to weep through the clay itself. Clay actually very, very unique, bentonite clay and things like that. When they get wet, they swell up so tightly, they inhibit water from passing through the membrane. But the problem is he did not have that bentonite clay. They did not have the right clay on the property. So this would fill up during heavy rains and then it would drain in several days. And it exposed all these big, muddy, sloppy banks around the perimeter. And it was driving Shaq crazy because his goal was to drive into his property, look across as he came up to his house, look across to the left, and he wanted to see a beautiful body of water. So what we did was we gave him that. We came in, we removed all the clay, the slop, we hauled it off to the back of the property. We came in with a rubber membrane. The rubber membrane, instead of being several feet of trucked in clay, is millimeters thick, but it is 100% impermeable membrane. So now we have a waterproof envelope that we could actually work inside of. Now we had a barrier between the groundwater and the water that we put on top of it. That increased some of the challenges because now once you have groundwater building up underneath this rubber membrane, it was going to cause bubbles and stuff like that. So we had to put in a drainage system underneath everything, but that drainage system is going to relieve the pressure from under the rubber membrane. This is going to allow us to control the water quality. Koi, I mentioned it just a few minutes ago, they are bottom feeders. If you have a clay bottom pond, they're going to be eating down on the bottom, and when they do that, that's known as a bioturbation. A bioturbation is basically when an organism is stirring around inside of the ecosystem and it disturbs the benthic zone. If you've ever walked around in a clay bottom pond, it's going to stir up this black nasty stuff and all types of compounds into the water, and it's going to make the water turbid and dirty looking. Not necessarily bad, but it's not what our customers are looking for. They're looking for that clean water. They want to see the fish inside the pond. They want to see the water lilies on the surface. So by putting in the rubber membrane, now I have a barrier between the animal and the subsoil. Now if they're digging around, they're going to agitate the top couple inches of rock and gravel on the surface during their feeding process, but they're not getting to the deeper sediments down on the bottom. I remember working with Blake's Exotic Animal Ranch. He had these Asian turtles that were actually burrowing down into the bottom of the pond. So what we did was we put in a barrier in place. We blocked those animals from stirring all that stuff up. Once we did that, water's pristine. All comes back down, the right recipe.
Somebody wants to know, you and your team really build an amazing pond, Ed. I was wondering, since you built that beautiful overflow, is it possible to put a pump into Bamabass's 5-acre pond and use the overflow as a waterfall, or would that deteriorate the water quality of the recreation pond?
That is a great question. We recently completed Bamabass project, unbelievable project, 5-acre pond that Stephen and Liz built on their property. We built the recreational pond to give them really, really good water quality for their kids to interact in the water. We do not want to mix the water from the bass pond into the recreational pond. The reason is very simple. And I love the idea of connecting them because it would create a cool visual. Maybe we can pull it off by making a fake connection point where it looks like they're connected, but they're really not. But the reason I want to keep them separated is Stephen actually fertilizes the bass pond. And the reason he fertilizes it, if you're trying to grow monster bass, you have to think, what do bass eat? Bass eat smaller fish. He's adding fertilizer because as you add fertilizer into the water, those are the dissolved nutrients that are going to grow algae. Algae is the basis of the food chain. Now it jumpstarts the ecosystem and it starts to bioaccumulate the carbohydrates. Those simple carbohydrates are eaten by zooplankton. Zooplankton is a microscopic animal, the little tardigrades. Remember when I did that cool little pond that I could hold in my hand? Looking for tardigrades and the copepods and the rotifers and all those cool little animals. These guys are super important because they're going to eat the microscopic algae. They then become food, and when you have that ecosystem set up with healthy algae, you get massive bass. It's a several year process, and what I love about that is he has the forethought to think about setting up the ecosystem right in the very beginning, fertilizing the pond so he could actually harvest those fish several years from now. The reason I don't want to mix the water is I would be taking fertilized water into my recreational pond. The water would become turbid, not necessarily bad. It's not that it's not healthy, but he's not going to be able to do underwater videography because the water would be cloudy. We want to have clean, clear water. The water lilies, the plants that we put in, the filtration that we put in place. I'm telling you, I cannot wait to go back next spring, continue his journey of creating a unbelievable project. Everybody raise your glass, have a sip, enjoy the holidays. I hope you enjoyed my crazy rambling here. I want to thank you all for your support. Got my silver play button this year, which is definitely huge. And actually since then, I have more than doubled. So well over 200,000 subscribers. So I hope you enjoy all this incredible content. I know I do. It energizes me. There's nothing I love more than talking about this stuff, and unfortunately I probably blew your entire evening here. So hopefully you were drinking along with me at the same time. But when you really look at things, the concept of fractals, expanding geometries, you know, once you understand these concepts, it will open up your mind to a whole different world, and that's exactly what the channel is about. I want to connect people to nature in water the way nature intended it. So again, I appreciate all of your support over the past few years, and I hope you enjoyed this fun little contest, and I hope you're tallying along with all the different crazy biological terms, not just the terms themselves, but how many times I actually said them. I do have certain ones, tardigrade, copepod, rotifer, that I really love saying on a regular basis, drives people crazy. Plankton. Gosh, there's so many biomimicry. I love it. I love this stuff. I love talking about this, and there's no better place to do it than right here in the Hobbit house. Next year, 2024, we're going to be kicking things off with some incredible content. I love all you guys. Happy holidays, and we'll see you soon.